Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to our strategic conversation today with Japan's ambassador to the European Union, Mr. Kazuo Kodama. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining this conversation today. Really welcome to this format. Ambassador, you've been in Brussels for 4 years. Since 2016, and you're one of Japan's most senior and experienced diplomats. And I have to say that since you've been here, there have been some very great improvements, or let's say upgrading of Europe and Japan ties. You've got a strategic partnerships agreement signed between the EU and Japan. You have an economic partnership agreement. And last year as well, there was a partnership signed on connectivity, sustainable connectivity, and quality infrastructure. And just a few days ago, there was a digital leadership meeting with your Prime Minister Abe, and Ms. von der Leyen, the European Commission President, and Charles Michel from the EU Council. So there's been this digital meeting because you couldn't have a face-to-face EU-Japan summit. So we have a number of questions to put to you. This is being recorded, pre-recorded, so there will be no online questions, but we have received a number of queries and comments from our network, so I will be putting some of those questions to you as well. Now, it may seem strange, Kodama-san, but I'm going to kick off with a question on Brexit, and I'll tell you why. When I first met you 4 years ago, you were really passionate about Brexit. You knew the nuts and bolts of what was happening, and you really were, for me, the expert to go to when I had some queries or questions about how Japan was reacting to Brexit, but also Brexit itself. So now, Ambassador, 3-4 years on, how do you view this? And is Japan as concerned about Britain's withdrawal from the European Union as it was 4 years ago?
Well, thank you, Shara, again, for giving me this opportunity to conduct a kind of strategic conversation on any important issues confronting European Union, Japan, and beyond. Well, on this Brexit, well, indeed, I would say I am still hopeful that at the end of the day, of course, the deadline is coming soon. I mean, by the end of this year, EU and the UK are expected to conclude a deal to shape the future relationship between the two parties. And yet, of course, what we are hearing from two sides are rather dispiriting in the sense that, of course, two sides stand far apart. But I'm still hopeful that, of course, in the end, the two sides will find a way forward. Having said that, of course, at least from the first of course, now the UK has already left the European Union, and they are now in the transition period. So everything is as if UK is still a member of the European Union. So to that effect, I think Japanese companies, or even any non-European companies, are still doing their business as they have been doing when the UK was a member. So we hope that, of course, whatever outcome will be coming out of this negotiation, again, I hope that the outcome will be, of course, the least damaging to the economic situation in the EU-UK, between the EU and UK, and then, of course, between UK and Japan, or between the EU and Japan, and then the non-EU member states. And of course, anything can happen, but I'm still hopeful. And then actually, my final thought is, of course, we have been asking both Brussels and London, please make a deal. Please don't end this process with no deal in place. So that is our position right now. Yeah.
Right, so still uncertainty and a bit of confusion about how fast this will happen and how well it will happen. And will it be, well done, or will it still be acrimonious? So thank you for that. Obviously, Japanese companies and the government watching very carefully. Before we talk about EU-Japan as well, Kodama-san, I wanted to ask you about the G7. The G7 meeting is now postponed to September, and there are suggestions from US President Donald Trump that other countries should be brought region as well. I think he's talking about Australia, India, and South Korea and Russia. And I've just written a piece for Friends of Europe in which I say that the G7 is a relic of the past and we should really just jettison it, throw it, ditch it, and start looking at other ways of engaging in a more inclusive manner. Your thoughts, please.
Yes. Well, Shada, well, this is now more than ever, I think, very timely kind of topic in the sense that, of course, President Trump has been rather changing his thought when to convene the meeting through the VTC arrangement or face-to-face. And then if not now, July, then September or beyond. And then now he's making a proposal to invite more than the original members of G7 and then reaching out to other players. You wrote a very interesting piece. Yes, you said, Shara, the G7 is a relic of the past. And it's time to ditch it and move on. To that, I have been the Japanese diplomat for the last 43 years. Can you believe it? 43 years. And then through those years, I have been on and off in the sense that being a part of the delegation to support my prime ministers over the last 40 years who took part in this G7 summit meeting, or G20, or ASEM, or APEC, whatever you name it. But my answer to your professional course is emphatically no, or more mildly put, I would say the jury is still out. Now, the reason is, the point is, of course, I would say the expiration, the date of expiration of G7 is not passed. Why? Number one, historically speaking, of course, people always point out the center of gravity of economic activities has been shifting from the west to the east. And then now this century is the center of Asia. But I say, yes, maybe as in terms of a very mid and long term, maybe mega trend, that may be happening. But remember, even if I just give you the statistics, year 2018, only 2 years ago, according to IMF, the share of the G7, including European Union, is still above 50%. Or, I mean, this is the, to be more precise, 54.2% of global GDP is being produced by G7. Of course, China's 15.8. India, of course, India is, of course, I would say, yes, the 3.2 and so on. My point is, still more than half of the global GDP is being produced by the G7. This means a lot. But not only that, another point is, of course, this G7 is a group of countries who are like-minded. And I want to emphasize, don't take the like-minded states very lightly, especially when we are confronted with the rising, of course, antagonism or rising negative trend against the liberal democracy. I think we have to remember that, of course, the G7 is not only to discuss the global macroeconomic management or financial management, not at all. They are now they have been entrusted to discuss how to maintain, how to improve global governance, right? So I think these are and then final point is simply, remember, I guess I know you have covered G7 meeting many years, yes, I know, and some of the points, of course, very correct, but still I want to tell you, the sheer number of leaders is just 7 or 8, even including Madame von der Leyen and Mr. Michel. 8, if Mr. Putin is out, you see. This is a very cozy number. And then if you really want your leaders to have a very candid, a real interactive discussions, 4 is a very good number. But if you start talking about ASEM, can you imagine how many countries? 53 countries. And then, if you even give 3 minutes to each one of 53 leaders, yes, simply unmanageable, you see?
Right,
so
right.
Again, I say, and then my final point, another point is G7 also is evolving in the sense that G7 is no more a domination, leaders' own grouping. they are actually, now G7 is expanding into a group of health ministers meeting, trade minister meeting, finance minister meeting, of course. So especially in the case of the WHO reform, or the how to to learn the lessons in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think G7 actually is preparing its own draft to put to the WHO to start. So these are we have still the agenda setting power. And of course, we should not be complacent. We should not be, arrogant, of course. But I think still, my final point is still G7 has a role to play.
Okay, so we agree to disagree on that, but thank you very much for putting forward your very valid arguments. Let's move on to talk about EU-Japan relations. Now, at this digital leadership meeting, you we saw the press release, and it was several pages, went through it, very, very interesting. A lot of collaboration and cooperation to tackle COVID-19 and prevent further pandemics as well, working together for the hunt for a new vaccine, etc. For you, where is this strategic partnership? What are the next steps that you, Ambassador, would like to see in this relationship?
Thank you very much. Yes, I was, of course, I also watched this, the VGC summit meeting between the three leaders, myself, and then I want to make just several points to answer your question. They recognize, number one, of course, the global solidarity to defeat the virus, as well as to ensure the economic recovery. So this is the very priority challenge where, of course, our strategic partnership will build upon. Now, then they also affirmed the commitment to continue, in their words, tackling global challenges together with international, arena. Meaning, of course, yes, we use G7, G20, UN, and WHO, all, I think, yes, international fora will be fully mobilized. In any forum, EU and Japan, I think, will more than ever work together, compare notes, and then to coordinate the positions. That's what we have to do. And then I would say, of course, we actually, yes, as you said, over the last 3 years, the two sides have concluded the two most important fundamental agreements, SPA and EPA. So our leaders actually, this time around, of course, they actually confirmed and they also reaffirmed that built on these great achievements. So let us say now to translate what we have agreed upon in these two basic legal documents into concrete actions on the ground. So for example, we are certainly more than ever willing to work together with EU in helping Africa on the issue of African sustainable development issues, or issues of this healthcare system reform, or you name it, climate change, I think. And then if I may just pick up two or three specific areas where we are, EU and Japan will definitely I think, take on now is, of course, climate change. Number two, digital transformation, including the digital taxation issue, based on, we are asking the OECD to prepare for it. And then the research and innovation, and then also, of course, trade. WTO reform is actually simply, we cannot wait any further. We have to engage on the reform issues, of course. So on all these fronts, I think, although this was the very first meeting between Prime Minister Abe and then President Michel and Madame von der Leyen. But of course, I think since they started their job 6 months ago, but I have to tell you, they spoke together a little over 60 minutes with simultaneous interpretation. So they talked a very lot, and then among themselves. So I feel very, very pleased with the outcome. Yeah.
Right. Ambassador, so I've been following Europe-Japan relations for a very, very long time, previously when I was a journalist, and now, of course, with Friends of Europe as well. And we saw that after the election of Donald Trump and his retreat from multilateralism, from commitments made on the international stage. Europe and Japan really worked very fast, more faster than ever before, to do these, to strike these deals. What was the message? What was the political message that Europe and Japan wanted to send to a watching world about your commitment to multilateralism in this rather, let's say, strained and tense moment?
Well, thank you very much. Well, I would say, of course, in the area, of course, of the free trade or multilateral free trading system, I think EU and Japan actually showed its example, I think, by concluding the most advanced economic partnership agreement, which entered into force on the 1st of February last year. And then for information, actually to our pleasant surprise, throughout last year, 2019, I think, the two-way trade between EU and Japan actually recorded a little more than 5% increase. So even in the face of the global economic trade stagnation, I think we achieved a positive sum, I think, trade increase. We are proud, and also we feel responsible to take a lead to ensure that a free trade, which of course must be fair, and then non-discriminatory, and then fair, open, and non-discriminatory principles will be fully, of course, enforced. And we actually took a lead. And then, important, of course, our leaders also discussed very seriously how to, again, engage the United States. Of course, we need the US, yes. And then more than ever, that's also my conviction. Or if I put it differently, I think, again, to fight against illiberal kind of authoritarianism, which seems to be rather prevalent, I think, in the world these days. I think more than ever, the trilateral, I think, cooperation, US, Europe, Japan, I think are needed. And then if US is really withdrawing from that kind of cooperation, then more than ever, I think it is the duty of EU and Japan to take a lead. And we will continue to deliver this message, and then to mobilize a global, I think, coalition of the willing or like-mindedness, I think, to ensure, yes, the overall multilateralism will not be, I think, diminished, or even will be enhanced or strengthened.
Right. Ambassador, now, thank you very much for that. So the focus very much now is on recovery. You know, economies have been hit hard, some devastated. And now, you know, we're coming out of a lockdown. The state of emergency in Japan has been lifted as well. And we're cautiously going back to work, slowly but surely going back to work. How can Japan and Europe, I mean, apart from the multilateral commitments, work together to ensure that this post-COVID recovery is, first of all, quick, but also green and sustainable?
Well, first of all, let me tell you, today, actually, the global, the situation is such that, more than 6.6 million people have been infected. And then 375 people died because of this virus. Now, the Japanese situation is quite, in a way, rather different in the sense, of course, out of 120 million people, only 17,000 people have got infected. And out of 17,000, 900 people died. So why we have been so successful? I would say we have adopted what we call the 3 guiding principles, guidelines, in which 3 C's, 3 capital letter C's, meaning avoid closed spaces, avoid crowded places, avoid close contact. So 3 C's have been meticulously, I think, observed by the Japanese people without resorting to the lockdown as such. I think somehow we have been able to I think, contain. This is unfinished business. But now I think with our own, of course, expertise, of course, our doctors, our researchers are actually as good as those in Europe, in the United States, or even in China, I think. So we are working so hard together with EU and the United States, I think, to produce first, of course, a antiviral medicine. Number two, also the vaccines development. And these are, I think, very, very, but important thing is agreed, I think Prime Minister agreed with Madam von der Leyen and also Mr. Michel that when we make sure that these medicines or vaccines become available, the important thing is let us leave behind the most vulnerables. So in order to assure that, of course, let us make these medicine accessible and then affordable. So these principles, accessibility as well as affordability, are the key concept. And then for that matter, Prime Minister Abe made a very interesting proposal, I think, to introduce what we call the patent pool. I think so by so doing, I think European countries, pharmacies also could manufacture these vaccines in the less expensive manner. So that is one tangible way of EU-Japan collaboration, I think. That is definitely going to happen. And then, of course, in the WHO, this proposal will be fully discussed. And then one more point, of course, is the debt relief. It's a very important issue, yes. So here, especially in African countries or any, the developing countries, I think, who are, of course, feeling the pinch in this regard. Oh, yes, we are now, of course, the leaders also agreed, yes, actually I quote, to initiate at the earliest appropriate moment a stepwise process of, this is I think, excuse me. I think, anyway, debt relief and the Paris Club, mechanism, and then all these issues, the mechanism will be fully mobilized, and then ensure that I think the debt issue will be truly detrimental to the future, the economic recovery of developing countries.
Right, and of course, Ambassador, time flies when you're having an interesting conversation. We've already come, excuse me, to the end of 20 minutes, but I wanted to say, of course, what you're doing together, Japan and the European Union and Africa, also has to do with high quality infrastructure and sustainable connectivity. Japan has been a very traditional and, let's say, partner for Africa. When I traveled in Africa very often, I saw Japanese businessmen, Japanese experts, health experts, railway experts everywhere in Africa. So that's obviously one very important area where we can work together. Ambassador, we've come to the end of 20 minutes, but I want to give you a final 1 minute, if you don't mind. If there's any other message that you want to convey to us and to the people watching, because we have people watching online from all over the world, actually. So a 1 minute message that you would like to send to our viewers.
I will share one of my the favorite, I think, a sage's sentence, word with the viewers. That is the sentence, that is the message remarked by Reinhold Niebuhr, the American theologist, a philosopher, between the two wars, I think. He said, man's capacity for justice makes democracy possible. But man's also inclination to injustice makes democracy necessary. So the point is, I think, we are learning a hard lesson. Democracy is not a necessary sufficient condition of a good governance or in a free and democratic world. No, we have to do more. And then, therefore, I think we have to also revamp our current democracy by introducing more sense of fairness, more sense of, I think, justice. And by so doing, I hope we'll be able to also to work together to overcome even the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. I think we are together.
Thank you, Kodama-san. A very, very moving message, inspirational message about the need for justice, fairness, and also to get rid of inequalities across the world. Thank you very much for joining us for this conversation. We've talked about Brexit, G7, and of course the future of Europe-Japan relations. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you everyone for watching us and for your comments that came in earlier. In a few days, I will be interviewing for a strategic conversation Adel Abdel Latif. He is Deputy Director, Interim and Strategic Advisor of the UNDP Regional Bureau for the Arab States. So we will be going to the Middle East and looking at the situation that COVID-19 and the pandemic have caused in the Middle East, the worsening perhaps all the conflicts and the unease and concern that we see in many parts of the world. So I hope, Kodama-san, you'll be watching that as well. Once again, Ambassador, thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Stay well, stay healthy, stay safe.
Yeah,
bye.
thank you. Thank you, Shala. Thank you very much.